Considering Labour's first year anniversary, not as a milestone to be celebrated, but as a moment of profound uncertainty for Labour itself, for the opposition, for the country, uh, I think there are lessons that can be learned. I mean, is Labour having a problem because it's Labour, or is it having a problem because of something else? Is it possible that we can attribute all of Labour's problems to Brexit, for example? I would say yes. Well, no, I wouldn't say entirely yes. A lot of the problems are Labour's own approach to things, but Brexit doesn't help. Labour swept to power on the promise of stability. It pledged not to frighten the markets, not to be radical, not to be irresponsible, and by and large, it's done what it delivered, unless you happen to be sending your child to an independent school, what in the past we probably have called a public school, unless you happen to be a farmer, unless you happen to be elderly and relying on fuel for the winter. But stability is not a vision. People see economic stagnation, social pressures, and a government caught in permanent firefighting. Neil Kinnock is correct in observing the party's lack of narrative. There's no grand project on offer, no galvanising idea, and crucially, no plan for growth that's credible in the eyes of the public, the markets, or even Labour's own MPs. The VAT on schools has not produced the 6,000 extra teachers. Of course, it hasn't, because that's a ridiculous idea. The NHS has not really improved in the time in the last year, and what else? Well, nothing has improved. Everything's got a little bit worse. One of the great illusions about big parliamentary majorities is that they guarantee obedience, but they don't necessarily, especially when more than half the MPs are first-timers with little party loyalty. Recent rebellions over welfare cuts demonstrate that MPs are willing to defy the leadership, knowing they may be only one-term politicians anyway. The supposed discipline of 411 seats is, in practice, fragile. If the government can't even cut winter fuel allowances without insurrection, what chance does it have to impose the painful choices needed to balance the books? The Treasury's options are stark and narrowing. Stealth taxes through frozen thresholds, what's called fiscal drag, have already raised billions but are politically toxic, especially as pensioners begin to see their state pension dragged above the personal allowance. Wealth taxes remain deeply divisive within Labour itself. Starmer has so far refused them, but MPs on the left are pushing hard, seeing wealth taxes as both moral and financially necessary. Spiralling inflation is, of course, the unspoken risk. Reeves wants to avoid borrowing, but if growth stalls and she refuses new taxes, markets will punish Britain through higher yields and a weaker currency, pushing prices up. The Liz Truss episode is a warning still fresh in the memory. Rachel Reeves has already had one budget with £40 billion in tax rises. She may need to repeat that in the autumn or face savage spending cuts. Brexit is the unspoken gnome in the grass. It's not a question of left or right, it's a question of Brexit. Britain's economy has been structurally weakened. Supply chains are less efficient, export markets are harder to access, immigration controls choke growth in vital sectors, and there's little more to do than plod ahead as Rishi Sunak did, tinkering at the edges. Starmer has promised not to rejoin the single market or the customs union, much the same as Rachel Reeves has locked herself in with all her various rules, fiscal rules. The bottom line would be to stop all this nonsense of what we're not going to do and actually tell us what we are going to do. No one wants to know what you're not going to do. Who cares what you're not going to do? It won't happen if you're serious. If you're not serious, it will happen, and then you'll look as if you've got egg on your face. So the economic penalty of Brexit remains baked in at the moment. Labour's vow to fix growth while ignoring Europe's gravitational pull is fantasy economics. If Labour loses its majority or fails to win again, who is the alternative? The Conservatives are broken, discredited, and internally divided. They cannot mount a serious challenge in the short term. Reform UK is rising. That's the real danger. If voters conclude that Labour is just continuity Sunak, that they're all the same. Farage's party will exploit the mood of betrayal and betrayal fatigue. They will become the protest vote of choice. The Lib Dems, despite Ed Davies' optimism, are stuck in the low teens nationally, partly because of Ed Davies' optimism. If Ed Davey were to depart, were to resign, and somebody with a little bit more competence were to step in his place, the Lib Dems would become the natural opposition in the present chamber of the House of Commons. Why? They have the numbers. But people from the left and the right are not going to join a party run by somebody soiled with the post office scandal. Even if Reform has no serious economic plan, that may not matter, however, if Ed Davey remains in place. Protest parties rarely do have a plan. Labour got into power because it was a protest party, in effect. There is the protest party is there to channel anger, not to govern, and anger is rising. So the answer is, can Starmer and Reeves rescue themselves? The answer is yes, but only with brutal honesty. They need a coherent economic plan that explains the trade-offs. You cannot say no new taxes while promising better services and balanced budgets. They need party discipline that recognises the price of rebellion is electoral defeat, not the loss of the whip. They need a fresh story for Britain, one that admits Brexit has failed and promises serious re-engagement with Europe. Without that, there's no credible growth strategy, and that would make it clear that they were offering something other than reform. The time has come for a party to stand up and say, we are anti-Brexit. Reform offers you Brexit, more of the same. Come on, Reform, if you want with your 4 members to become the party of government, go ahead, try it with your Brexit obsession. We, in the Labour Party, are anti-Brexit. They will attract a vote, and they will attract the sympathy and the help of the Lib Dems. They may even stay in power. But without that, they are doomed, and so is the country. And perhaps even at this point, Labour needs to consider a new Chancellor. Reeves is under immense strain. Her emotional state is a personal matter, but politically, her credibility is now in question. A reshuffle is unavoidable, I think, in the mid-term, not even in the long term. It's unavoidable in the mid-term, possibly even in the short term. The real choice for Britain in the next election may not be Labour versus the Conservatives, but Labour by default versus Reform by design. If Labour cannot define itself clearly and lead with conviction, it risks becoming just the lesser evil in voters' minds. And that is how anti-establishment movements thrive. And we see that all the way back through the history of the last century. Labour promised stability. Now it must promise leadership, with clarity about costs, fairness, and its real vision for Britain after Brexit. And that should be. Brexit hasn't worked, so we need to realign with Europe. We don't need to go back into Europe. We need to realign. And if necessary, we need to provide an alternative form of alignment with Europe that other countries can follow. Countries like Albania, like Ukraine, countries that are eager to be united with Europe, and they could follow our initiative. We need to start setting the agenda rather than following. We need to also look at the 1951 Refugee Convention. That is the only way forward to solving the refugee crisis and the migrant crisis. Labour promised stability. Now it must provide leadership, with clarity, with costs, with fairness, and its real vision for Brexit. Otherwise, the country risks sleepwalking not into a better future, but into a dangerous populism led by, well, it may not even be led by Farage now. Who knows who will be leading it in the next 2 years? Reform splinters, but it doesn't matter, because reform as a concept is simply the protest, the pocket into which all the protest votes are shoving their hands. This is the challenge Keir Starmer faces in year 2. It's not merely about policy detail or parliamentary arithmetic. It's about whether Britain has any serious alternative to the cynical anger of Farage and the exhausted nihilism of the Tories. If the Tories get rid of Badenoch, maybe there's an opportunity, but if they replace Badenoch with Jenrick, there is no hope. A government without a credible opposition is a tragedy. Oh, and by the way, if the Conservatives replace Badenoch with Jeremy Hunt, there is no hope. Hunt is a wounded animal, and he knows it. That's why he's made comments only the other day, which seem odd about the NHS. Just start thinking about it. A country without a credible government, which is what we've got at the moment, is a catastrophe.